Good afternoon, and hi, and thank you for joining to a bit of a different conversation in an Agile DevOps conference, because it's a conversation about the end customers. And I want to take you through a journey that we share at Intuit. And before I do that, I want to start with two actually questions to the audience. So the first question, and with a raise of hands, and I don't know if we have mics, I'd love to hear if there's someone here who feels like they truly understand the difference between innovation and invention. Take your time. Okay, we have someone who's willing to share. So I'll repeat what you say if you don't have a mic.
Hi. So I think the difference is that the innovation is the process that creates the output of the product, which is an invention.
Okay. Anyone else feels like they have a good grasp of understanding what's the difference between invention and innovation?
I think invention would be something that didn't exist before, and innovation may be a different way to do something. I mean, it could be that you're not maybe solving something new, but maybe doing it differently or better or in a new way.
Okay. Thank you both. So it's important to get a full understanding of what the difference is, because inventions are abundant, and we have a lot of them, and we don't call them all innovations. And the big difference is, by definition, is that an innovation is something that at the end brings value to someone. So it's not only an invention that was done in a lab somewhere, but someone is actually enjoying and using this new way of doing things. So I want you to keep that thought in mind throughout this conversation. The second question that I want to ask is, who here feels like they have a good understanding of what is the core difference between what we call B2B and B2C? Well, it's true that a B2C product is, at the end of the day, a product that a end user uses, but sometimes also with B2B. And the big difference is actually who makes the decision around purchasing and using versus not using. It's important to understand that in a B2C world, when you produce a product for B2C, the end user, the person who downloads your app or who logs into your application, makes the decision whether they want to buy it, whether they want to use it. You have to bring immediate value to that end user in order for you to get whatever it is the problem you're trying to solve. The B2b space is a little bit trickier. Most solutions today that are offered in B2B, the decision about purchasing them, using them, deploying them, is not necessarily done by the end users. And for those of you who are from my generation, when software was sold physically in boxes, you may remember a term called shelfware. And it was a term related to software that was sold to organizations and no one used it. So it may have had great innovations and great inventions in it, but at the end it became shelfware, meaning it was put on the shelf. And there were many reasons this term was created. A lot of it had to do with the fact that the decision makers to buy the software were, executives, were the IT department, were basically not the end users, the people who will end up using this software. And here's something interesting that happened since that, the time that I'm describing to you. So we're living now in the cloud era, and in the cloud, you actually are very easily able to measure who's using your software, as opposed to back in the days when software was sold in disks, and an IT department would buy it, maybe a part of a bundle, maybe they bought 3 solutions and only thought they needed one. Today, companies buy software and are able to measure quite easily, or much easier than before, if the customers are using it, or if the end users are using it. So this gap between B2B and B2C is slowly diverging. And I'll tell you, I spoke with SAP the other day, and they shared with me that not only are they in the cloud now measuring who is using their software in big organizations, but they're considering a pay-per-use model. So what this means is that me, as an employee, I'm an employee today of a big corporate company, by not using software or by using software, I'm signaling to my company whether the software brings me value. So those decisions that were done in big conference rooms or in golf courses or in restaurants with a lot of expensive wine about purchasing software are now changing, because all of a sudden, me as an end user, even though it's B2B software, I have a way to influence the decision around whether my company will use this software or not. And I'll tell you, we had software that was deployed. A year later, they realized no one was using it, and it was undeployed. So I want you to table these two thoughts, because they're going to be your lifeline when you start questioning things that I'm going to talk about, our methodology around innovation, and especially because I'm representing a B2C company, and I'll share a bit more about what this is. So remember these two questions about, one is innovation is when actually someone uses your software. And I heard from many developers that the worst thing in their life is to develop software no one uses. And the second thing is that if you work in a back-end or a B2B environment, we're living in a world where you're actually affected by your end user a lot more than you think you are. So I'm going to share with you the story of Intuit. Who here has heard of the company Intuit? Okay, exciting. We have a few hands. We're a software company that has been around for quite a bit, for 35 years, not 1,000, 35 years, or 36 by now. We're about 9,000 employees. We're Silicon Valley based. We have $5 billion in revenue. And we are right now we have offices in 24 locations, and in Israel we have an R&D center. Our software is mostly financial software, and we sell it either to end users, so consumers who try to manage their household finances, or small businesses who are managing the accounting of their small shop. So these are a gardener who's giving gardening services, or a surfer who decided to open a shop for surfboards and now has to manage his surfboard. We also have a new up-and-coming segment of the market, which is freelancers. So these are the businesses of one, and these are the Uber drivers, the Fiverr, the people who sit on Fiverr and provide services, or sell on Amazon, or sell on Etsy. So these are people who have decided that they want to be a part of what is a huge migration now from full-time employees to self-employed. We have solutions for them as well. Now, what's really special about Intuit, and by the way, it's a company that in Israel it's less known, but in the US a lot of companies come to learn from us on how we cracked innovation at scale. And there's a reason why they come to learn from us. Intuit has been around for 36 years, started in DOS, and managed to do these amazing technological shifts from DOS to Windows to web to mobile to cloud without missing a beat. So the graph behind it is our stock price, and it shows basically that throughout these changes, there was no drama in terms of our trajectory of growth. And I personally attribute this amazing transformation of a company from a DOS company to a cloud, what is today AI-infused software company, to one thing: our customer obsession. And our customer obsession is very unique, and this is the story I want to share today. And in particular, I want to share one methodology which is very unique to our entire employee base, and it's called deep customer empathy. Now, I know there's a lot of companies who say we're all customer obsessed, and we care about our customers, and we survey customers all the time, and even if they're internal customers, we bring them into focus groups, and we ask them. But here's one thing that our founder, who's quite the innovator and a very well-regarded person in the industry, here's something he started 35 years ago, which still happens today. And it's called a follow me home. And the idea of a follow me home is that not only do you want to learn from your customers in order to make sure that you are solving their real problems, but you want to do it in their environment, and you want to do it on their terms. And so he invented this follow me home methodology, and the cool story is that when software was sold like the way he's holding it, in CDs at Best Buy and Office Depot, he would literally go to Best Buy and to Office Depot and see who's taking out the box from the shelf, and he would run ahead of them and waited for them at the cashier's checkout. And when they finished paying, he would introduce himself and say, "Hi, I'm one of the founders of the company of the software that you just bought. Would you mind if I followed you home and saw you install it?" And I know it sounds creepy, and we have different methodologies today to do it in a more sort of, I'll call it tactful way. But the reality is he would literally go to people's homes. This was personal finance management software, and sit with them in their house as they install his software. And so what's really special about this methodology and about Follow Me Home in general is that we want to meet our customers not in our offices, not in our labs, not on the phone, not on a survey. We want to do it in their environment. And it's important to know, especially with this audience, that customers are not just the end user customers. If you're a developer, a back-end developer, your customers may be other developers consuming your services. If you're a DevOps person, your customers may be people who are asking you to deploy their software. So customers is a broader term to end users. And the reality is that this methodology can be used to all types of people who at the end consume what it is you're trying to produce, or even more importantly, have the problems that you are trying to solve. So here are the key reasons of why we have developed it into a full, we call it a studio, but it's a capability to access our customers wherever they are in the world and follow them. And just so you know, today they get paid for it about, I don't know, $75 or $100 for an hour session with us. So we don't follow them home just at Office Depot, but we schedule it ahead of time. But the reason we do it is A, because it's the best way to gain real customer empathy. B, because we really believe that being in their environment is very, very different than surveys, focus groups, and bringing them into our labs. And C, because this allows our teams, and I'll talk in a minute about our teams, it allows our teams to literally fall in love with the problem and not the solution. And I hope this is not the first time you hear this wonderful phrase, which is a key phrase when trying to innovate. Because for any problem, there are many solutions. And you want to first explore all solutions, and you can't do it without falling truly in love with the problem you're trying to solve. So here's the key thing that happens in our company. We actually ask all of our 9,000 employees, so this is not for PMs, this is not just for marketings, this is not just for designers. Every single person in our company is asked to follow home at least 2 end user customers from our base every year. And obviously to use follow me home methodologies throughout their day-to-day work, depending on what they do. So if you're an HR person, you would go and follow me home to your employees that you're trying to serve. If you're a DevOps person, you would go to the people whose services you deploy. And so this is an ongoing thing in what we do. And the important part is that everyone is expected to do it. And here's the reason why this is most important. In many organizations today, the product manager, who has the most touch points with customers, goes and collects requirements from customers, then comes to the lab, talks to the developers, says, hey, listen, these are the problems we're trying to solve. Here are the priorities. The developers say, yes, sounds good. They're smart people, so they actually implement, their 2 cents into what they really think should be implemented and how it should be implemented. And then they go to the QA person, and they say, listen, we developed this great thing. Here's what we need you to test. And the QA person, who's never met the customer, but is a smart person, also implements, their 2 cents and kind of adds in their flavor of things. and decides what tests are most important and how they should be tested. And when they're done, they go to the DevOps person and tell them, listen, here, this is ready to be deployed, and here's the availability that we need you to do, and here's the reliability metrics. And the DevOps person also says, very relevant and very interesting, but deploys their 2 cents into the things, and they decide, what are the times where reliability matters most, or what are other metrics that they think are most important. And what happens with us, instead of doing this chain of command, if you take this entire group and you put them in a car and you send them all off to meet with a customer, and they all sit together in the room and hear the same story from the person it is they're trying to solve their problems, literally magic happens. And I'll tell you, true innovation really happens there. Because you're able to bring in all the minds into one room to hear the same set of problems, and everyone can bring their angle into the story and contribute to true innovation. So I really hope that until now, I managed to sort of get you intrigued about about the possibility of whether it be going next door to people who use your services or going next street to customers who are using your software. By the way, it's not complicated. It requires a telephone or an email of saying, hey, I want to meet with you and hear about your problems. Some companies have a way to compensate for it, but it's not a necessary thing. Before we do this, I want to touch on a few tips that we have learned throughout our journey on how to do it right. Because not every follow me home looks the same. And I'll tell you, and especially important here in Israel, a follow me home is an exercise in listening. Targil behakshava. This is not a journey where you go to someone with a full armed full of ideas you want to sell them, or innovations that you want to test on them. It's a process where you go to their environment to listen to their problems and to learn new things that you didn't imagine before. So here are things that we really want to focus on when we go and talk to people. First, you're here to listen and observe. You're not interviewing them. You don't come with a set of questions that you think that you need to go through a checklist. You're observing what they're doing. You're actually allowed 2 main questions. The first one is, can you show me how you do something? Can you show me how you go about sending a receipt to your customer? Can you show about how you collect from people who owe you money? And the second question is, why? When they do something and you observe it and it looks a little bit interesting to you, the second thing you can ask is why. We really recommend for teams not to start saying, oh, did you consider doing this and this and that? Oh, yes, the solution or the feature that what you're really trying to do is hidden here. No, this is a setup where you're there to listen, to take notes, and to really understand and immerse yourself in the problems of the person in whose shoes you're trying to sit in right now. This is especially a good tip for people who are super innovative and are just curious to, full of ideas and really curious to learn about what the other side thinks about them. These follow me home sessions are not the place for that. These are not innovation pitching sessions. These are exercises in listening. And we really try to make sure that our teams don't fall into that trap. So if you do have other questions, you always make sure they're open-ended. We ask our teams never to ask yes/no questions. We ask them to keep them very open-ended and constantly ask why. If a customer says, oh yeah, to send an invoice, I open this spreadsheet. So ask them, why do you open this spreadsheet? And if they say, I open the spreadsheet because this is where I put all my data in case I lose it from your system, ask, why are you afraid you're going to lose the data? So this is a root cause analysis exercise as well. And here's what we really learned, that the true innovations actually come from surprises through these follow me homes. It's when we sit at a customer house or business and we see that they have 3 screens open, but at the end they're trying to do things through their phone, and we assume that they're going to go to those screens, or that they have a baby in one hand and are only capable of reaching only some of our features. And so these surprises are super relevant because this is where a lot of the innovations end up coming from. And the key thing is to really, really always drill down with a why. A why is what you get when you sit with a customer to understand what are his real problems and what are his motivations in life as it relates to what you're trying to solve and help him with. Now, at the office, this team comes back and does a debrief. And this debrief is also very special because it puts together not only what we saw and heard, but also our analysis. Whoops. So the debrief looks something like this. First, we sit as a team. Everyone puts on a sticky note. I remember hearing the customer say this, or they did that. So on the right side of this image, you see what they said and what they did. So we note all these things. Everyone took notes. And then we do an analysis of what we think he felt and what we think he thought. So for every action that we saw our customer do, or for every word that he said, there's something hidden underneath it. Why were they really opening up a spreadsheet? Were they really worried that they'll lose the data and wanted to copy it there? And how did it make them feel? Do they trust our software? If they have to open a spreadsheet every time they want to send some invoice into their customer, does this mean that they trust us? Because if we want to really innovate, we need to go deep down into how we make our customers feel and understand how they get there and what are their true problems. So we're living here, I think, in sort of an industry that is, if you ask me, very technology-driven and very, to some degree, I think a big chunk of the Israel ecosystem is back-end driven. Or lives in the B2b space. And this is why I chose to open with those two questions at the beginning. Because at the end of the day, there are only so many things that we are able to do without reaching out to the customer. I know we're a great nation of A/B tests, and we're a great nation of analysis of data that we get from customers. But data gets us only so far. It answers what are people doing. Are people pressing on the yellow button versus the green button? Are people choosing to fill out this form versus that form? But not until you sit with your end user and really understand their environment and the process that they go through before they click this green button, and what's their mental model before they chose to use this form. But unless you have this why, you don't have the full picture of how you can help your customers and your end users solve your problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bat Umesh.